Artists intentionally pushing the general public's buttons is a tale as old as time. In the entertainment industry, pretty much any press is good press as long as your name is in people's mouths, and being controversial is a way of gaining more exposure and therefore more success. While not every attempt at stirring the pot has worked in an artist's favor, they did at least provide audiences with something to discuss, and that's what I want to do today. Let's take a look at some of the most controversial records released by major pop stars, and how they affected each artist's careers. Bangers by Miley Cyrus. In 2013, Miley Cyrus was at an awkward point in her career. It had been 2 years since her show Hannah Montana ended, but the general public still saw her as a Disney act who made music and served as a role model for children. Miley was tired of being held to these standards, and even explored that topic on her previous album, 2010's Can't Be Tamed. However, after leaving the Disney-owned Hollywood Records and signing with RCA, she was ready to not only shed her child-friendly reputation, but completely obliterate it. Early in June, she dropped We Can't Stop, the lead single from her upcoming project, and pearls were clutched. A mid-tempo party track, We Can't Stop was controversial for its lyrics about drinking, recreational drug use, and sex. The video was even more shocking, with Miley at a house party, twerking, dancing with giant teddy bears, making out with dolls, the usual. This was genuinely shocking at the time. It can't be overstated just how much of a 180 this was for her. Not only did it represent a sexually liberated and more confident Miley, but it was also just very bizarre. The whole thing felt like Just Dance by Lady Gaga if it went on an acid trip. There was truly nothing like it at the time from a mainstream artist. This was the moment, as it racked up the most views in 24 hours on Vevo than any other video had done up to that point, a record Miley herself broke with her next single, Wrecking Ball, which infamously featured her swinging around naked and suggestively licking a hammer. I just hope the girl had her tetanus shots. This video was very polarizing, with some saying it was an artistic triumph, and others saying it was a cheap attempt at shock value. Even more divisive was her performance at the 2013 VMAs, where she was twerking it up on Robin Thicke and having a little too much fun with the foam finger. This, in my opinion, was the last truly iconic VMAs moment. Everybody was talking about it the next day. Whether you loved it or hated it, you definitely had an opinion. The final single from Bangers was Adore You, which had a relatively less scandalous video, but still a very suggestive one. In the course of just a few months, Miley completely reversed her image from being a child-friendly Disney act to a pop provocateur. She had some minor scandals in her career before this, like the photo taken of her smoking weed in 2010, or her performance at a party in the USA at the 2019 Choice Awards, where she danced on an ice cream cart that some people thought was a stripper pole, but nothing came close to the uproar Bangers caused. She was inescapable in 2013, truly the biggest celebrity of that year. And while she's gone on to somewhat denounce the whole era as being her wild party girl phase, there's no doubt that it brought her career to new heights and showed that she was a far more ambitious artist than most people gave her credit for. Erotica by Madonna. It's almost laughable to single out just one album from Madonna for this video, as she's pushed boundaries and intentionally sparked outrage since the very beginning of her career. However, I think the most obvious pick would have to be 1992's Erotica. Following her chart dominance of the 1980s and inescapable superstardom that came with it, Madge decided to use her platform for good by making an album that touched on themes such as the AIDS crisis, homophobia, and women's sexuality. This might as well have been career suicide in the early 90s, when the US government had been very conservative for over a decade, and the AIDS epidemic wasn't given the proper attention it needed to due to a lack of government interference and the general public's ambivalent at best feelings towards gay people. Madonna was never afraid to speak her mind. Hell, her 1989 album, Like a Prayer, even included a fact sheet about AIDS, but with this new record, she was going to push the envelope for what was acceptable from a female pop star. The title track was released as the lead single in September 1992, and saw Madge taking on a dominatrix alter ego named Dita. The video was X-rated to say the least, with full-on nudity and portrayals of sexual fantasies. It only ever aired on MTV 3 times, all after midnight, and was banned promptly after. The album itself came out in October, along with her coffee table book called Sex, which similarly included taboo imagery. And to complete this unholy trinity of scandalousness, she also starred in the erotic thriller movie Body of Evidence, which was released in January 1993. All of these projects led to widespread public backlash, with many saying Madonna had gone too far, and even deemed her career to be over. While we know now that was obviously not true, I could imagine thinking that too if I was around to witness this era. No other pop star had ever been this direct or open about sex, and hardly any other artist from the time took such a loyal stance with the LGBT community. Erotica, despite the title, really isn't a hypersexual album. It's about romance and love in the time of AIDS, and Madonna's frustrations and devastation over the loss of several of her gay friends and collaborators. This wasn't a message most people were comfortable with hearing at the time, especially when Madonna herself was basically being accused of making softcore porn. It took years for her to get back in the public's good graces, with her next album, Bedtime Stories, being a much softer record tonally than Erotica. However, in the decade since its release, Erotica has been widely recognized as a landmark album that broke down barriers for female pop stars and cemented Madonna's legacy as the gay community's fiercest ally. Without this album, we most likely wouldn't be as used to seeing sexual themes in our music nowadays. Pretty much every major female pop star, like Britney, Rihanna, Beyonce, Ariana, and Christina Aguilera, all owe a debt of gratitude to Madonna for destigmatizing sex in pop music. And speaking of, Stripped by Christina Aguilera. Released almost a decade to the day after Erotica, Stripped followed in Madonna's footsteps, being a wild reinvention for Christina. In the late 90s and early 2000s, Christina was marketed mainly toward teens and made bubblegum pop music with some R&B influence. However, this wasn't the image that she wanted, and when it came time to release her fourth studio album, Stripped, she was ready to leave her teeny bopper roots behind. Christina took on an alter ego called Xtina, who rocked skimpier outfits and had a more heightened sense of confidence than she ever had before. The lead single, Dirty, drew heavy criticism for its video, which depicted sexual fetishes and Xtina dancing around in assless chaps. This was a 180 from what a girl wants, to say the very least, and many media outlets and even other celebrities like Jessica Simpson and Kelly Osbourne condemned it. Further controversy would come from her onstage kiss with Madonna at the 2003 VMAs, which has gone down as one of, if not arguably the most iconic moment in the show's history. The general public simply wasn't expecting this bolder, more sexually liberated Christina after they had come to know her for being a relatively vanilla pop star, and this led to plenty of judgmental and misogynistic commentary on her transformation. The album itself received mixed reviews at the time of its release, with critics being polarized on Christina's new aesthetic and sonic direction. However, similar to Erotica, time has been very kind to Stripped, and it's since been recognized as one of the most influential albums of the 2000s, with artists like Demi Lovato and Selena Gomez citing it as an inspiration. I have a whole video diving a little deeper into the album itself, so check that out if you want to learn more about it, or if you want to take a trip down memory lane. I was a little too young when Stripped came out to remember the impact it had, but after finally listening to it in full back in 2015, it became, and remained, my favorite album of all time, and I'm sure plenty of other gays would probably say the same. Art Pop by Lady Gaga. This era was controversial not necessarily because it was shocking. By 2013, audiences had been shocked enough by Gaga, but more so because it was very messy. Very, very messy. Gaga's first three projects, The Fame Monster, and Born This Way, had catapulted her to superstar status in just a couple of years. Her outrageous fashion sense, high-concept videos, and general theatricality and campiness got all eyes on her, though this may have been more of a curse than a blessing. How much could she possibly up the ante before it became too ridiculous for audiences? And how far would she have to go to keep people's attention when they'd become so accustomed to seeing her one-up herself with each era? Art Pop, in my opinion, represents the end of Gaga's early days, when she was more focused on pushing boundaries and being the more left-of-center pop star, as a perfect storm of external and internal factors in her life caused this era to take a pretty big toll on her mentally. Not only did her manager, Troy Carter, leave her right before the album released in November 2013, putting a halt to any planned projects related to art pop, but Gags had also been suffering from a severe hip injury that developed into fibromyalgia. She was also a little too reliant on Mary Jane Holland at the time, and even admitted in 2019 that she didn't remember a lot of the art pop era due to it being such a chaotic time in her life. The girl was overworked and tired, flying in and out of different time zones, not getting enough sleep, and always trying to keep her showmanship up. This chaos manifested itself into the album and its promotion. There were a lot of crazy moments from this era, from a controversial performance of the song Swine at the South by Southwest Festival, which featured performance artist Millie Brown vomiting on Gaga, to the Art Rave, a 2-day promotional event where she debuted the world's first flying dress, Volantis. It sounded very cool on paper, but in actuality, it just kind of hovered a little bit. In addition to this, there was a lot of unfulfilled promises from this era that may have gone unfulfilled as a result of the split from her manager. Among them were certain features that were meant for the tie-in mobile app, a documentary, a sequel album called Art Pop Act 2, and also a performance in space. This was an interesting time to say the least. However, the real reason I included Art Pop in this video is because of its infamous second single, Do What You Want, which featured R. Kelly. Even though the song itself received positive reviews, her decision to work with R. Kelly was criticized given his past sexual misconduct with minors. A video for the song was shot but never officially released, though snippets of it have leaked, and it's really uncomfortable to say the least. Gags ended up apologizing for the collab in 2019 and removed the R. Kelly version of the song from all music services, though the version with Christina Aguilera still remains accessible. It was genuinely baffling that she collabed with him in the first place. I was a freshman in high school at the time, and I remember feeling so conflicted because I really did love the song, but having R. Kelly on it just really rubbed me the wrong way. It's not like people didn't know he was a sex offender at the time. It wasn't even an open secret kind of deal, not that that would have made it better, but still, having him on a song where she's singing Do What You Want With My Body was a very tasteless choice, and remains probably the biggest controversy of her career. In the years following this era, Gags was able to get back into the public's good graces after gradually toning down her image, and has since cemented her legacy as one of the greats. Art Pop, despite being a good album, represented a very dark time in Gaga's life, and over a decade later, the whole era lives in infamy among the Little Monsters as being the most hectic moment of her career.